Hare Krishna, everyone. So we're going to have a small Bhagavad Gita class here. If you'd like, you can just take a seat and listen if you like, or just Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chanavalabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajachanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jayarada Madhava Kunjavihari Madhava Jaya Kunjavihari Jaya Gopi Chanavalabha Girivaradari Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brachachana Ranjana Yamunatira Anachari Jayarada Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jayarada Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chanavalabha Girivaradari Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brachachana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brachachana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Everyone in the temple room and online. So today we're reading from a new chapter, chapter 18, entitled Conclusion, the perfection of renunciation. Hare Krishna. And the verse reading today, Hare Krishna, thank you so much. And the verse reading today is 18:1. Hare Krishna, thank you so much. The verse reading today is verse 18:1. Arjuna uvacha sanyasyasya mahabaho tatvam ichami veditum Tyagasya cha rishikesha pritak keshi nishudana. Arjuna uvacha sanyasasya mahabaho tatvam ichami veditum Tyagasya cha rishikesha pritak keshi nishudana. Arjuna uvacha sanyasyasya mahabaho tatvam ichami veditum Tyagasya cha rishikesha Pritak keshi nishudana. Okay. Okay, I'll just go to the word for word meaning because there's no one yet to start. Hare Krishna. Arjuna uvacha, Arjuna said, Sanyasasya of renunciation, Mahabaho, Almighty Armed One, Tattvam, the truth, Ichami, I wish, Veditum, to understand, Tyagasya, of renunciation, Cha, also, Rishikesha, O Master of the senses, Pritak, differently, Keshi Nishudana, O killer of the Keshi demon. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Arjuna said, Almighty Armed One, I wish to understand the purpose of renunciation, Tyaga, and of the renounced order of life, Sannyas, O killer of the Keshi demon, master of the senses. Purport. Actually, the Bhagavad Gita is finished in 17 chapters. The 18th chapter is a supplementary summarization of the topics discussed before. In every chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna stresses that devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal of life. This same point is summarized in the 18th chapter as the most confidential path of knowledge. In the first 6 chapters, stress was given to devotional service. Yoginam api sarvesham, of all yogis or transcendentalists, one who always thinks of me within himself is best. In the next 6 chapters, pure devotional service and its nature and activity were discussed. In the third 6 chapters, knowledge, renunciation, the activities of material nature and transcendental nature and devotional service were described. It was concluded that all acts should be performed in conjunction with the Supreme Lord, represented by the words Om Tat Sat, which indicate Vishnu, the Supreme Person. The third part of Bhagavad Gita has shown that devotional service and nothing else is the ultimate purpose of life. This has been established by citing past acharyas and the Brahma Sutras, the Vedanta Sutras. Certain impersonalists consider themselves to have a monopoly on the knowledge of the Vedanta Sutra. But actually the Vedanta Sutra is meant for understanding devotional service, for the Lord himself is the composer of the Vedanta Sutra and he is the knower. Jai Shri Radha Gokulananda Ki Jai, Shri Sita Ram Lakshmana Ki Jai, Shri Sita Govinda Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. That is described in the 15th chapter. In every scripture, every Veda, devotional service is the objective. That is explained in Bhagavad Gita. As in the 2nd chapter, a synopsis of the whole subject matter was described. In the 18th chapter also, the summary of all instructions is given. The purpose of life is indicated to be renunciation and attainment of the transcendental position above the 3 material modes of nature. Arjuna wants to clarify the 2 distinct subject matters of Bhagavad Gita, namely renunciation, tyaga, and the renounced order of life, sannyas. Thus he is asking the meaning of these two words. Two words used in this verse to address the Supreme Lord, Rishikesha and Keshi Nishudana, are significant. Rishikesha is Krishna, the master of all senses, who can always help us attain mental serenity. Arjuna requests him to summarize everything in such a way that he can remain equiposed. Yet he has some doubts, and doubts are always compared to demons. He therefore addresses Krishna as Keshi Nishudana. Keshi was a most formidable demon who was killed by the Lord. Now Arjuna is expecting Krishna to kill the demon of doubt. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Tatati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrachatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Sachivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parichana Sahidam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sakana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Chakapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamani Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Pevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gora Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prashalini Vishesha Shunyavadi Pashata Deshatarine. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. I would like to, before we start the class, I would like to request the blessings of everyone present here tonight so I can speak something hopefully of value to everyone and also learn something myself from this class tonight. So thank you everyone. Okay, so let's get started. So we're talking about a new chapter today, the 18th chapter. So I'm thinking it makes sense to also think a little bit about what's happening in the previous chapters or what happened up until this point. So in the 16th chapter, Krishna describes people of two extremes. So people who actually have scriptural faith, the divine nature, and people who are faithless and have more like a demoniac nature. And in chapter 17, Arjuna inquires about the fate of those who have some other faith, which is not based on the scriptures, and it's maybe based on some other things. And Krishna responds by starting to describe different things about faith itself, but then also about various other activities in the three modes, like foodstuffs, sacrifices, austerity, and charity. And he ends by explaining that any sacrifice, charity, or austerity, which is done without faith in the Supreme, is by nature impermanent, asat. And then in the previous chapter as well, we got a little bit of a description of the various systems of yoga. So we had the yoga ladder, different processes to self-realization, and the supremacy of bhakti yoga, or devotional service unto the Supreme, has been emphasized in those previous chapters. Now, interestingly enough, similar to the second chapter, in this 18th chapter, Krishna gives again an summary or an overview about the whole Bhagavad Gita. Everything is spoken so far. Now this is interesting. Why would Krishna repeat himself? Is it because, I don't know, maybe Arjuna wasn't listening properly, or like any ideas why Krishna would repeat the same thing again, like he said already in the beginning? Any ideas? If you'd like to, you can just raise your hand if you have any ideas. No? Who read the Bhagavad Gita here so far? Some people? No one? Yes? Okay, one person. Mataji, you have any ideas why will Krishna repeat the same thing again? So by repeating, it's kind of sinking deeper into, yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember actually when I did the Gita Live course, they were also talking about that, and they said actually that we can see that actually many great speakers, they before they start the talk, they give kind of an overview about everything they're going to start talking about. So we have a bit an idea what's about to come, and we're mentally prepared. And then at the end of the talk, they give a summary of everything again, so it can really sink deeper and we can take more things away from it. So yeah, Krishna is the best speaker. He already did that 5,000 years ago. Now, I would like to speak about certain points from the purport where I put a bit more emphasis on it. So one thing in the purport was, it was mentioned that Srila Prabhupada writes, in every scripture, every Veda, devotional service is the objective. And that's explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, we don't really have the option to kind of study or read all the Vedas directly. Let me ask you a question. What do you think? How long does it take? So there's basically 4 main Vedic scriptures, Vedas. How long do you think does it take to read one of those Vedas? How long would it take you? Any ideas? Yes, sir? A lifetime. That's good. That's a good guess. Any other offers? No? No? Okay. So I did some research online, and it says just to read them, it takes roughly 4 years. But that's just reading, right? So you're very right. I mean, to really understand them properly, it takes probably maybe even more than a lifetime. So that's only for one. So now there's 4 main Vedic scriptures. So for all of them, we could say it takes roughly 32 years just to read through all the scriptures. So that's an enormous amount of time, right? Like we don't really have that time to just sit down for 32 years and read the Vedic scriptures. So we can ask ourselves, okay, what is the conclusion? Because, yeah, we can't study it ourselves, but we want to know what's the conclusion of the Vedic scriptures. So I did this class, actually, we have this Be a Monk challenge running, and I did a session on that as well previously. And we looked at the Vedic banyan tree. It's described in the Bhagavad Gita. Anyone heard before of the Vedic banyan tree? Mataji, yeah, right. So yeah, in the Bhagavad Gita, there's this image of the Vedic banyan tree, and it's said that's kind of like the essence of the Vedic scriptures, or that's kind of the summary, like what is it actually all about. And it's very interesting because we can see in this Vedic banyan tree that the Vedic scriptures are actually like a wish-fulfilling tree. So whatever desire you have, and you start to approach the Vedic scriptures with that desire, the Vedic scripture will give you a solution for that. They give you certain rites you can do, certain sacrifices, certain things you can do in order to get that. So if you want to become rich, if you want to become famous or wealthy, it's all described in the Vedic scripture as well. But if you want to go a bit deeper and look for the ultimate conclusion, the ultimate aim, then you also find that. So it's very interesting in this Vedic banyan tree, we can see how one desire is actually very closely interlinked to the next desire. So, we might just want a nice new car, but then once we have a nice new car, it's kind of like, okay, now I need a nice new garage to put the car in, and then for that we might need a bigger house, and for that we need a new job. And so a lot of those different desires are very closely interlinked. So one desire leads to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, and it's actually very, very difficult to kind of disentangle and find out where does it actually all start. So what we did in this Be a Monk challenge session was that I asked the guys, okay, what is any desire you have? right now. It can be an absolute material desire. It can be, okay, I want a new car, I want a new watch, I want to become famous. Or it can be something very spiritual, like, okay, I just want to have pure love for God. Whatever it is. And so we wrote all those different desires down on a whiteboard. And then we split up in pairs of 2 people. And what we did basically is we tried to ask each other like questions, try to dig deeper. So we had this like one desire, but then we tried with different questions, we tried to dig deeper to the root desire. So why is it that you want a new car? Is it because you want to be recognized by other people? And so we started breaking those things down until we landed on like one root desire. And it's interesting because the reason why I did that was because I was in retreat with His Grace Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, and he mentioned that his Guru March, Bhaktivedanta March, he gave this quote that every action a person performs is either an expression of love or a call for love. And so what interesting enough is that we found out with all of these root desires, we could categorize them in one of those 2 categories. So all of those desires are based on either asking for love, like wanting to receive love, or wanting to give love. So for example, with the car, when you just want to get appreciation from other people, then it's like a call for love, right? You're looking for that loving exchange. And then we found out, okay, if we're all looking for that love, for that loving exchange, where can we actually find it? And material relationships are not always perfect. They have their ups and downs, and they're temporary. But the real relationship where we always can get love from, it's always there for us, and we can tap into it at any moment, is our connection and relationship with Krishna, right? So that's always there. And when we have that loving connection and relationship with Krishna, then we can see how all of those root desires are actually fulfilled. And as a result, all of those material, superficial desires as well. So either by having that loving exchange, we might lose our interest in those material desires, or we might still get them because Krishna arranged certain things, but then we don't value them as much anymore. It doesn't matter so much for us anymore because we have something higher. And that's actually also confirmed by the purport, where it says again that devotional service to the Supreme is the ultimate goal of life. So this allows us to slowly detach more and more and start to kind of renounce our material desires, because we know actually what is it we really want and what is it we really need. So there's a small story as well which I would like to share to kind of emphasize that point. There was a man, and he was living like more in the countryside in a beautiful area, and he had this amazing house, and he was so happy about this house. He absolutely loved it. It was in a nice place, and a lot of people liked that house as well, and they came and wanted to buy it off from him, and they even offered him like double the price of the house. But he never agreed because he really liked that house and he wanted to keep it. So then one day he came back from his travels, and then all of a sudden, coming back to the countryside, the place where he lived, he could see that hundreds of people were gathering around his house, and he was wondering what's happening. So then he started walking, and he went through the crowd, and then all of a sudden he saw his house was on fire, and the flames were already like attacked most of the house, and there was not really anything he could do about it. And he saw, okay, it's just burning up. It's burning up. It's just completely in flames. I can't do anything about it. And he was starting to get really, really sad. And tears started coming to his eyes. And he felt like, no, why does this house now need to burn up? So then, while he had this crisis, his son started coming towards him, and he started talking to him and talking something into his ear. And he said, don't worry so much. You know, actually, in fact, I sold it yesterday, and also at a very good price. It was 3 times the original price. And the offer was so good, I just couldn't tell you, and I couldn't wait for you. Please forgive me for that. So then he said, oh, thank God. Okay, it's not my house anymore, so okay, everything's good. And he became more relaxed, and he started to watch how the house started burning down. Now, just after that, his second son started running towards him, and he was going to his father, and he was saying, like, "What are you doing? Like, you're smiling, and the house is on fire. Why would you be happy about that?" And the father said, like, "Oh, don't you know? Your brother has already sold the house, so it's not ours anymore." But then he was saying, "We have only taken advance amount, and we haven't settled for the full price yet. So I doubt very much that this man is now going to give the full price for that house." So then again, he became very upset. He's like, "Oh no!" Tears started coming to his eyes again, and he started to become really anxious and thinking like, "Oh my God, like I'm losing everything here." And then his third son started coming towards him, and this third son told him, "Don't worry, I spoke to this person, and the man said he's a man of his word, and he just came and he told us that it doesn't matter whether the house is burnt or not. It is mine, and I'm standing to my word. I'm going to pay the full price that I've settled for, because neither you nor I knew what's going to happen to the house." And then again, he became happy again. And I was like, "Okay, all good. It's not mine, and everything's settled, and everything's fine." So it's quite interesting story because it kind of very visually displays attachment and detachment, right? So it's very interesting. It's the same house. The house is on fire, same situation. But in one situation, he's completely upset and he felt like he lost everything. But then in the next moment, he felt like, "Okay, everything's good. It's not my house anymore." It's interesting, right? So a lot of times we can see that in our lives as well. Now, I would like to speak a bit more about detachment. So I think we can say there's different levels of detachment as well. So the first level of detachment is physical detachment. And then the next level of detachment is mental detachment, mentally detaching. So how do we detach more on the material side? By starting to attach more spiritually. Because those two kind of are like, it's like a balance. The more we attach spiritually, the more we can detach materially. And the opposite way as well, the more we're attached materially, the more difficult it becomes to be attached spiritually. So there's also a very nice analogy which has been given by in a class from His Grace Vrindavan Chandra Prabhu. And he spoke about a very nice analogy to see the difference between the different steps in the yoga ladder. So we got Sakam Karma Yoga, Nishkam Karma Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. So he was saying, now imagine a farmer who wants to grow all kinds of different fruits. And let's say he planted 100 seeds, and from those 100 seeds, all the seeds bring fruits, and 100 mangoes start to grow at the end. Now the farmer could say that those seeds are brought fruits by Krishna's mercy. So I'll give 50 mangoes to Krishna, and I'll keep 50 for myself. So this is called Sakam Karma Yoga, where one is attached to fruits and work. So one is attached to the results from his activities and the work itself. Now the farmer could also say that all the 100 mangoes only grew by Krishna's mercy, so let me give all 100 mangoes to Krishna. So this is called Nishkam Karma Yoga, where one is not attached to the fruits of his work, but is attached to the kind of work he's performing. So for example, you could also say if now that person's spiritual master will be coming and say that Krishna doesn't want you to plant or grow this type of fruits. Krishna doesn't like the mango so much. He would rather wants guavas because he likes them. Then the farmer could reply, "No, I can't plant them. I always used to plant mangoes, and that is my work. I want to stick to that." So there we can see there's an attachment to the type of work he's performing. But a devotee farmer would say, "Okay, Krishna, whatever you desire, I'll do guavas now." And this is called Bhakti Yoga, where one is completely detached to the type of work he's performing and to the fruits of his activities. So he just does whatever Krishna desires and whatever pleases Krishna, not considering his own personal desires. Now, in this verse, it's also very interesting. We can see actually that there's two words which have exactly the same translation, tyaga and sannyas. Both are kind of translated as renunciation. Now, what's the difference between those two words? Tyaga, it means one performs his duties which are prescribed by the scriptures, but he also still performs activities which are fulfilling his own particular personal desires, while still remaining detached from the results. Whereas sannyas means one gives up all activities for fulfilling particular personal desires, and he completely and solely focuses on his scriptural obligation to develop spiritual understanding, spiritual knowledge, and purification, and ultimately liberation. So advancement in Krishna consciousness doesn't only come from renunciation, but also from knowledge. And in the purport, we can also see that Arjuna was addressing Krishna as Keshi Nishudana, the killer of the demon of doubt, because knowledge actually removes all those doubts, right? And how does that work? How does knowledge remove doubt? Because when we got knowledge, it leads to a change in our type of thinking, right? And a change in our type of thinking leads then in a change in our way of feeling, and ultimately in a change in our way of acting. So in that way, knowledge can bring about a huge transformation. Also, quite interestingly enough, about renunciation, why is it so important to renounce? We can even see nowadays, like modern science shows that as well, like we can see that in neuroscience, that the higher our expectations, the more likely we get disappointed. So actually they test on that as well, and they could figure out if we have very low expectations, but then something nice and something good happens, there's a huge release of dopamine and we feel very good. If there's something nice happens which we didn't expect, we feel very good about it. On the other hand, if we have high expectations and the same event happens, we don't feel as good. We still feel good, but not as good. And there's also a big chance that if that event doesn't occur or is below our expectations, we start to feel disappointed and we start to feel bad. And then our happiness actually drops below bottom level. So it's very important that we have that renunciation, that detachment, and not so high expectations to outcomes. Also, detachment doesn't really mean, like a lot of times when we hear detachment, we feel like, okay, it's just about being cold, not caring so much. But there's a big difference between being attached and being involved. So how could we, what example could we give? So let's speak about maybe a student, right? So a student, he's like studying, he's putting a lot of hours in, he's practicing for his exams, and maybe other friends, like which he used to know before, which maybe are not studying, they could say, oh, like you renounce so much, you're not like going to the movies anymore, you're not going out so much anymore, you're just all the time sitting at home and studying and learning. You're completely renounced, you know. But it's not so much renunciation, because that student knows as well that this is actually going to lead to something much better long-term in the future. So he kind of gives up those lower things for something higher. He knows, okay, this is an investment which is going to pay off down the line. So from his perspective, it's not so much renunciation, because he's going to get something higher on the other end. And that's a good way of looking at it as well. Like a lot of times we feel like it's about giving up something, but we're actually getting something bigger, something better on the other end. And also a lot of times we think that, you know, having more options, having more things, accumulating more things, or more variety makes us happier. But in fact, we can see that actually the opposite is the case. It can be almost stressful. Anyone ever experienced, like, when you go to the supermarket and there's maybe like, you got like 20 or 30 different types of cereals, 20 or 30 different types of milk, right? So there's like this huge variety which we got nowadays, but it's actually stressful because you don't even know what to pick. And then you need to decide, okay, what am I going to do now? And I actually just read recently, and that was quite interesting, something about booking holidays. So who likes holidays here? I mean, I guess everyone, right? Okay, we got some people which don't like holidays so much. So I recently found out that about 25% of people think that holiday planning is one of life's biggest stressors. And some studies actually showed that the average British person spends about 30 hours, the equivalent of 4 working days, just to research and prepare and plan for his holiday trip. So, and this preparation is spread over about 5 weeks. So now, ironically, that's about double the amount of the length which is actually going to spend in his holidays. So it's quite interesting to see that the amount of options we have nowadays, it can be actually it can be bewildering. It can be it's just it leads to something which we also can call, maybe you heard of it, decision fatigue, right? Like there's so many different options and we're just overwhelmed by all those different options and we don't know how to decide. And ultimately, we just end up being really fatigued and tired out by those different options, and we end up making bad options down the line because we had to make so many decisions beforehand. Now, that's also why we Srila Prabhupada spoke a lot of times about simple living, high thinking, and it's actually a very powerful concept when you reduce the amount of options which we have. Now, how can we try to detach more practically? So I always like to try to bring things a bit more to a practical level. And this is actually from the book called Gita Free, where it speaks as well about how can we detach more from material things and go more deeper in our spiritual life. So now there's 4 questions you can ask yourself to really try to make that shift more from being materially attached to going more towards being more spiritually attached. So the first question you can ask yourself is, what is it that you identify yourself with? So you really want to find out what is your attachment. So it can be different things. Maybe it can be actually a position you have. It can be something you own, a possession. It can be a certain role you play, certain abilities you have. And then the next step after that is you want to find out what is the motivation behind it. So why do you like this activity so much? Now, once you figured that out, you want to shift towards with the next question and ask yourself, how could this thing, this ability, this position be taken away from me? How could I lose this in my life? Or maybe even how has it been taken away from me in the past? Because material things, it can always go away at any point. And the next question then is to shift more towards what could be a spiritual version of this that you could more identify with. So when you go through those different questions, you can clearly see how there's a shift from those material attachments, finding again out what is the material and what's the motivation behind it, and then slowly, gradually shifting towards how can I use this in a more spiritual way, to really go deeper in my spiritual life, because the spiritual things are always going to stick with us. We're always going to have those, but the material things, they're always going to go through changes. And also then really you want to try to imagine, like, how would your life be if your life and your values would be based more on spiritual values, right? It'd be much more sustainable, much more long-term, lasting. As well, the Sanskrit word vairagya, which we also love, that it means kind of detachment or renunciation in a way as well. It stands for detachment, but also it has a double meaning, because it actually consists out of the 2 words vishesha and ragya. So another translation we could give to vairagya, which means detachment, is also a very special type of attachment. So from our perspective, when we study the Bhagavad Gita, we can see that detachment doesn't mean like giving up everything and being away from everything, but rather attaching to the right things so we can then let go of the lower attachments. So that's why we really want to try to make that shift, and those questions can also help in that way. And then I would like to end with a small quote from Srila Prabhupada, where he wrote in a letter to Chayananda Prabhu on September 29th, 1967. He said, "If your consciousness is absorbed in Krishna, you are always a sannyasi." So he really kind of emphasized that point, that when you're always attached or absorbed in thinking of Krishna, you're always renounced, you're always detached. So yeah, that was a few points I wanted to share on this verse today. Now, we still have a bit time. I would like to open up if anyone has some questions, any comments, feedbacks, any thoughts you would like to share. Please feel free. Yeah, thank you so much. Anyone? People. Yes, thank you so much. I'll just repeat the question for the people online. So Mataji was asking, so when we speak about detachment, it's okay, we can understand that it's a simple concept in a way, but then what about if it comes to kind of people which are close to us in life, family, friends, right? That's the question. So yeah, very good question. Okay, I mean, detachment in the sense of the people we have close to us and we love. Again, yeah, it can sound very like strong, very like, okay, you know, what does it mean you shouldn't care for them? No, detachment doesn't mean we don't care for them. Detachment means we do care, we help them, but then we also let go of the outcome, right? So a lot of times we maybe experience that when like we have like people close to us which are going through difficult times, and then they ask us for advice, and then we give them advice, and then they might not be doing it, and then we get really upset, like, okay, I gave you advice, like, why are you not following it? So we can see there's an attachment to the outcome. So again, it's like different attachment, and being involved is different. So we're very much involved. We do care very much, but we don't want to be attached to the outcomes or to other people, Krishna, to the activities which other people perform. And yeah, in a way we can also see, this material world is temporary. Our relationships here are temporary, but we can make the most use of it. And in fact, having that perspective, rather than making us sad and making us frustrated, it can actually put things in a perspective and make us value the time we have with our loved ones much more and be much more grateful for it. And I think as well that's also a good way to looking at it, and also knowing that we should use this opportunity to kind of grow together in our spiritual life, in our family, with our friends, with our loved ones. So in that sense, we can also make our relationship much more long-lasting, sustainable, and eternal in that sense as well. I don't know if that helps. Otherwise, thank you so much. Nice question. Very nice question. Anyone else? Any last questions, points? Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. And thank you so much for being so attentive. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavanshan Sri Rupam Chakrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakanitam Sham Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna.
Jaya Jaya Gora Chandi Arati Jhanavitatavani Jagamanalobha
Jhanavitatavani Jagamanalobha
Kivadakshine nitai chan Vame gadadhara Dakshine cha Vame gadadhara Nikate अद्वैत श्रीनि वासचत्रधार কিবা বসিয়াছে গৌরাচান রত্ন সিংহাসনে আরতি করে না ব্রহ্মা আদি দেবদানে কিবা নারহারি আদি করি চামর ডুলায় সঞ্জয় মুকুন্দ বাসু ঘোষায়াদি গায় কিবা শঙ্খ বাজে ঘণ্টা বাজে বাজে করতাল মধুর মৃদঙ্গ বাজে পরমরসাল কিবা বহু কোটি চন্দ্র দিনে বদন উজ্জ্বল দল দেশে বনমালা করে জলমালা কিবা শিব শুকনারাদা প্রেমে গদা গদা ভক্তি বিনোদ দেখে গৌরার সম্পাদ নমায়ং বিষ্ণুপদায় কৃষ্ণ পৃষ্ঠে ভূতলে শ্রীমতে ভক্তি বেদান্ত স্বামীতি নামিনে নমো नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी कश्यता देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gokulananda, Radha Gokulananda Radhe. Jaya Radha Gokulananda, Jaya Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhans Parivrajakacara Nityalila Pravishta Stotra Shatasishmat Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhans Parivrajakacara Nityalila Pravishta Stotra Shatasishmat Bhakti Siddhanta Swarasati Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki साक्षात बैराग्य गौर किशोर दास बाबा जी महाराज की श्रील सच्चिदानंद भक्तिवेदांत ठाकुर की वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास बाबा जी महाराज की श्री रूप श्री सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्ट दास रघुनाथ सर गोस्वामी वृंद की नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की युग धर्म हरिनाम संकीर्तन की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि श्री गौर भक्त वृंद की अमल पुराण श्रीमद् भागवतम की गंगा माई की जमुना माई की भक्ति देवी तुलसी महारानी की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरी गोवर्धन मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की मायापुर नवद्वीप धाम की श्री क्षेत्र श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की अयोध्या धाम की निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल ऑल ग्लोरीज टू द assembled devotees हरे कृष्ण ऑल ग्लोरीज टू द assembled devotees हरे कृष्ण ऑल ग्लोरीज टू द assembled devotees हरे कृष्ण ऑल ग्लोरीज टू गुरु एंड गौरांग ऑल ग्लोरीज टू श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रह्लादलाददायिने हिरण्यकशिपूर्वक्षः शीलतङ्खानखालाये इतो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहो यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहा Bahi Narsimho Hridaye Narsimho Narsimha Madim Sharanam Prapadye Tava Kara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare केशवद्रीता नरहरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे शवद्रीता नरहरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल नरसिंह भगवान की प्रहलाद महाराज की प्रभुपाद की हरि हरि बोल So we have prasadam being served outside, so please help yourself. And thank you for coming to the manor.